Hey there, Twisters. So for this video, I'm going to talk about a survey that was recently released on X from JFresh, very prominent in the hockey analytics community especially, and he had surveyed participants on which team would you root for in a head-to-head matchup. So there were over 34,000 combined matchups for all these fans to vote on. So it's like, would you choose Team A or choose Team B? And based on the responses, what he has done is compiled a rankings of people's favorite to least favorite team for his community, essentially. Now, do I think this is representative of all hockey fans out there? I don't necessarily think that that's the case, but I'll talk about some reasons why I think certain teams are ranked pretty high and why some teams are ranked toward the bottom. Now, let me know your thoughts about this in the comments down below, although I have to say, please keep it civil down there. God, things could get really interesting down there, but that's okay. We're here to service the fans out there, and we do have a lot of off-season content planned in addition to this, so stick around. All right, so the way that I think I'll talk about this is I'll discuss the top 5 teams, and then I'll discuss the bottom 5 teams, and then I'll quickly go through the teams in between all of them as well. So what's interesting here is that the top vote getter, the Avalanche, garnered 67.9% favorability, right, versus another team that could have been chosen in the head-to-head matchup. 67.9%, that's crazy, and that's over 6.5 percentage points ahead of the next team, the Sabres. Now, the Avalanche, they won the Stanley Cup 2 years ago, and you would think that just generally speaking, people would want to probably pick an underdog versus the more common favorite of teams. With the Avalanche, the reason why I think they're number one is because, first of all, like, who doesn't love Nathan MacKinnon? I think he's one of the most just likable talents in the NHL. I never see him get ripped or dunked on or anything. He won the MVP this year after years of being so close to reaching that milestone in his career. Cale Makar is probably the most entertaining defenseman to watch in the NHL, or he's right up there. And overall, it's not like the Avalanche have, that certain villain year to year that we'll see with some of the teams toward the bottom. And then what we see here is that with number 2 and number 3, these are teams that have been struggling for a number of years, especially second with the Buffalo Sabres. They garnered 61.4% of matchups won. Buffalo hasn't been in the playoffs since 2011. So I think that that has something to do with it. As JFresh even pointed out on Twitter, it's not necessarily everybody's favorite team, but it's more like they're hated the least, I guess, because right now, what fan base hates the Buffalo Sabres more than anything else out there? Not to mention the Sabres, just historically, right? Went to the final in 1975, lost to the Broad Street Bully Flyers, and then of course in 1999, lost on a controversial goal in Game 6 triple overtime against a team that's actually 4th on this list. Then in 3rd, we have my San Jose Sharks. I'm actually surprised to see them this high. I think that just in general, right now with the Sharks, that either, some folks out there are gonna, kind of feel bad that they've, that they actually had a lot of success and then just never won a Stanley Cup and have been horrible for most of the last 5 years. Or it's just apathy, right? And we'll talk about this with some other teams. People in general overwhelmingly like the Sharks logo and jerseys, right? All right, 4th, we've got the Dallas Stars. I was kind of surprised to see Dallas this high. Same division as the Avalanche, and, in recent years, they have matched up in the playoffs. The Stars, I think for them, you have a lot of exciting young talent. So like every year, somebody else on the Stars that hasn't even approached their prime has a fantastic season, whether it's Jason Robertson or Miro Heiskanen. We saw that a little bit with Logan Stankoven, Jake Ottinger for what he can do in the playoffs. So that's kind of what I pointed to there. So that one was a little bit surprising to me. And then we get to 5th, and that's the Canucks. Now, the thing with the Canucks, what they have going for them, even though this might not be on the most macro level, is that with Edmonton and Calgary, they're more rivals with each other than they are with Vancouver, at least at large. Now, I know that obviously Calgary hasn't been as good lately, so it is a bit surprising to see them up this high, given maybe my recency bias is showing here, but when we look at, the playoffs in the early 2010s, Vancouver was probably among the most loathed teams. We remember seeing all those memes about the Sedin twins, 2 girls, no cup, and of course the riots, right? Sure enough, here they are. Maybe that's because of, I don't know, similar like what I said with Dallas. You got Quinn Hughes, you've got Thatcher Demko, Pedersen, Besser, right? So anyway, they are the highest ranked Canadian team here. And yeah, I'm curious to know what else kind of might favor Vancouver versus other teams out there. Now we'll get into the bottom 5 here, but what I want to do before then is also highlight one more thing and look at the left column. The first 11 teams, roughly 1/3 of the league, only 2 of those teams are based in the Eastern Conference. One thing that I think contributes to that is that, you know, the West games are going to be on later in the evening, so people on the East Coast won't have as much of a chance to watch those games, so they might not develop quite as much animosity there. And I think that when we look at, you know, like geographical rivalries, right, all of the Eastern teams, except for like 2 in Florida, are pretty darn close to each other. A lot of those fan bases could drive to the opposing arena in a matter of just a couple of hours. So with the West, I don't think that there's quite that sort of tension when you have teams like, you know, Anaheim, for example, and Winnipeg. It seems like, you know, that's what, a 4-hour flight at least. So I think that has to be a bit of a factor here as well. All right, now let's go to the bottom 5 teams. We'll start at the very bottom, and that's the Vegas Golden Knights. You know, they won a Stanley Cup, and for their whole franchise's existence, they've been, I think, as much of a threat to winning a Stanley Cup as just about any other team out there. Of course, a lot of people out there are going to say that, you know, Vegas has taken advantage to the best of their abilities with the NHL's salary cap, which, you know, I'm not going to drill into that too much because I think most people are familiar with that. And also, we look at things like trading Marc-Andre Fleury. That was widely panned by the hockey community, given that Fleury is probably one of the most beloved players in our time. So I think that all those factors have to certainly be up there. But let's just say that probably 4 years ago or so, Vegas would probably be more on the like side, especially their first season. I think that they would be maybe even a top 5 team here. Then we get to 31st, and this is the Blackhawks, and I'm honestly not surprised to see either of these 2 teams here, to be honest. Now, this isn't a reflection of what I think of these teams. This is my interpretation of what I think the fan bases out there have to say about these teams. So with Chicago, of course, the 2010 scandal is going to be among the chief reasons. I think of, you know, the cups that they won during that era as well, 2010, 13, and 15. You would think of maybe how much favorability they've had in broadcast markets with how many outdoor games they get. Some people have their opinions about the logo, Connor Bedard, all the hype around him as a generational talent, and the Hawks getting the first overall pick, selecting him, and all the buzz that was around that. Again, I'll just be clear, this is not my personal opinion. This is my interpretation of the opinions of others. So that's why I think they're down there. 30th is Boston, and 28th is the Rangers. We'll touch on the Blues in a second here. Boston at 30th, not the most surprising. The Bruins have just been year over year one of those teams in the mix for competing for a Stanley Cup. And you couple that with a villain like Brad Marchand, and that's the reason why they're up here. You know, Boston itself, a very competitive sports market, has very fierce rivalries out there in a variety of sports. So all in all, I don't think we should be all that surprised to see them there, even though they have, of course, one of the bigger fan bases in the NHL. And then the Rangers at 28th, the President's Trophy winner. You know, again, New York, huge market, tons of exposure in the national media, so they are going to draw attention and ire in that sense. And with New York, kind of like I was saying with Boston, I mean, Matt Rempe did have a bit of an impact this past season, but like Jacob Trouba especially has emerged as one of the biggest villains in the NHL today. 29th, the St. Louis Blues did surprise me, I have to admit. Now, is there some sort of correlation with the Avalanche being in first and the Blues being all the way down in 29th? Because at least from my judgment of our community here, we're not really a community that thinks all that negatively about the Blues. We have a fair contingency of Blues fans out there. When we're thinking about villains, perhaps Jordan Binnington is among the villains in today's NHL, although I don't think there were any major incidents so much last year, at least not to my recollection. So that one does definitely jump out at me. I would think that the Blues would have been maybe, 12th to 15th, somewhere in that range. So then what I'll do is I'll quickly breeze through the other teams here. The Devils are in 6th. I am surprised to see them that high, but they're a young team. They're exciting to watch, so I think that they do have a lot going for them. Again, is there some sort of correlation here between the Devils and where the Rangers are ranked at 28th? Now the Preds are in 7th, and that was pretty surprising to me because, to be honest, I do see a lot of kind of lampooning of Predators fans for not knowing anything about hockey. They're not the only team that gets that undeserved attention, but the Preds with their catfish throwing and their, country music singing, a lot of people are going to get turned off by that because it's not like traditional hockey culture. Although it works great as somebody who has been there and has talked to a lot of Predators fans on this platform. So please stick around, guys. Utah's in 8th, and I'm not surprised to see them here because, there was a lot of empathy in the hockey community for the Coyotes situation. And so, and not to mention that franchise hadn't been really in the playoff picture in the last 12 years or so. So I think there's a little bit of fans out there saying like, God, this franchise has it so tough. The Oilers at 9th, I am maybe surprised to see them this high as the second highest rated Canadian team. I would have thought that maybe there would have been more animosity for, I guess, them being perennially in that Stanley Cup conversation for the last few seasons. But at the other end of things, of course, they have some of the most exciting players to watch in the NHL between McDavid, Draisaitl, and definitely Evan Bouchard should be part of that conversation now. And plus, they were Canada's team for the playoffs. There were millions of others in that country rooting for them to win the Stanley Cup, and they came oh so close. 10th is Winnipeg. Yeah, that's just a team that I think in general wouldn't draw a whole lot of hate and ire. They haven't had like one bitter rival ever since they were resurrected in 2011. I mean, they have their rivalries, but it's not like there's one team that, hates them more than they do other teams. At least that's what I would gauge out there. Seattle at 11th. They're only 3 years into their time as an NHL franchise, so I would have thought the Kraken would be just about here, maybe even a little bit higher. They've been in one playoff series, or two, excuse me. They won their first one against the Avalanche. But yeah, with the Kraken, there hasn't been anything that has drawn ire from other fan bases on a consistent basis, I don't think. 12th, we got the Panthers. And I mean, the Panthers, if we look at X, I would think the Panthers right now are probably one of the more hated teams in the NHL, especially with their reputation of being just a physical and sometimes, chippy team out there. So the Stanley Cup champions rated a lot higher than I would have expected. Although in our community, I would wager that maybe the Panthers, if not the Red Wings, are probably the second most represented fan base on my channel, just behind my Sharks because I'm a Sharks fan, but yeah. Then in 13th, we have the Hurricanes. I was surprised to see them this high, personally, kind of like the Panthers. I do see them get ripped on quite a bit, and that includes the fans as well. But like Urinating Tree said, they are becoming kind of like the Sharks in the late aughts and into the 2010s with the fact that they're perennially a Stanley Cup contender, but they can't get to the final. They can't get over the hump there. And that typically draws a lot of jeering and that sort of thing. 14th, we have the Wild. Pretty much where I would expect them. The Wild, they do have their rivalries with teams like the Avalanche, with the Blues, with the Stars, right? But really, they haven't been all that deep into the playoffs in the last 20 years. So I'm not surprised to see that people don't have a sort of ire for them collectively. 15th, we have the Penguins. Now, I think probably about 3 or 4 years ago, the Penguins would have rated lower on this list, certainly a lot lower if we look at maybe a decade ago. But at the end of the day, people love Crosby. They respect what he's doing at this point in his career and the fact that he's largely carrying the Penguins at this point. So maybe it's not all that surprising to see them right in the middle. Montreal, they've been mostly bad for the last few years, so I'm not surprised to see them in the middle. They probably wouldn't rank as favorable as a team like Buffalo or San Jose because those teams haven't won Stanley Cups just yet. 17th, Calgary. I thought maybe Calgary would get a little bit more love out there considering things have really taken a turn south for them and they've had to sell off some of their best players. Don't get me wrong though, the prospect pool is starting to build for Craig Conroy and his team. 18th are the Red Wings. I would have thought Detroit would have rated more favorably, but some of that is my own bias just given one, I grew up when the Red Wings were winning Stanley Cups and had, countless Hall of Famers, it seemed. And I would think at this point that some of the fans out there would be more empathetic to Detroit because they haven't been back in the playoffs since 2016, 2015, something like that. 19th are the Kings. Kings have been kind of middling over the past few years. They've been in the playoffs for 3 straight years, but have been bounced in the first round. Generally speaking, or when I think back to when the Kings were winning a couple of Stanley Cups in the 2010s, just like a lot of teams out there, the community generally didn't like them, but they are pretty far removed from that. People have a lot of love and respect for Anze Kopitar and Jonathan Quick, of course, before he moved to different teams. So I guess that's about right. Ducks at 20th, though, I would have thought that the Ducks would have rated higher because they've had 6 straight bad years. I would have thought that they would have been maybe in the top 10 because they're kind of in a similar situation as Buffalo or San Jose. I think that the future is going to be pretty bright for them, and it's going to show starting next year a little bit. 21st, we have the Senators, another team that hasn't won a Stanley Cup, and again, maybe a little bit baffled as to why they don't rank quite as high as San Jose or Buffalo. And it's always hard for me to personally gauge Ottawa because I'll be honest, I mean, they've been among the least relevant teams since I've had my channel. And so I think there should be some sort of correlation there. But just generally in the hockey community, it's not like we don't have too many fans out there that I know of who have Ottawa as like their second or third favorite team, although I can think of one out there. 22nd, Tampa Bay Lightning. Now, I would have thought the Lightning would have actually been maybe in the bottom 5. We have a great group of Lightning fans here, and a lot of them actually wanted Florida to win the Stanley Cup over Edmonton. Big shout out there. But with Tampa, I thought that just from what they did with managing their salary cap, the years that they were winning a Stanley Cup, I thought that that would have been a reason. Some of the more physical and chippy players they had on their team, from Patrick Maroon to Corey Perry out there, surprisingly, they're not quite as loathed as I would have expected, and that's good. I've been to Tampa, and it's actually a great place to watch a game. 23rd, the Islanders. I do see some lampooning of their fans on social media, but the thing with the Islanders is that when they're a really good team or when they actually make a deep run, they're doing that as a surprise when we don't expect it. So maybe that's a reason why they're not at the very bottom. Then we get to the Maple Leafs at 24th, and I thought they would have been lower, maybe even at the bottom. So what saves them from that? Could it be that they're not a Stanley Cup contender when it all boils down to it, right? They have a good regular season, and then they lose in the first round almost every year. Maybe that could be it. I'm not entirely sure. They also have a very large fan base, so that could have helped them a little bit in terms of staying out of the bottom 5. Washington in 25th does surprise me, to be honest. I think that the Capitals generally are well received. The only reason why I think they would stoop this low, and I don't like to get into things politically, but I know that there is some criticism out there of Alex Ovechkin and his support for the Russian government, but that would be the only factor that I could think of. But maybe the sample size is small enough to where that actually does play a bigger factor in this. 26th, we have the Blue Jackets, and the Blue Jackets, I don't think that they have a whole lot of haters out there, but as JFresh pointed out, he thinks that this could be because of the logo and the jerseys, especially when they have the Cannon jersey, right? The fans out there, the common fan, right? They don't think of Columbus all that much because they've been out of the picture for a few years now. And so it's just kind of like they're almost an afterthought to a lot of fans out there. 27th, the Flyers. And I don't think that really has anything to do with what happened this past year, but really it's Philadelphia. Philadelphia has a reputation as, for sports fan bases, maybe as the most contentious out there, certainly boisterous. When we talk about teams like the Philadelphia Eagles or even the Phillies, Flyers fans love having them here on the channel. But yeah, I think that just that reputation that has persisted with them for the last 50 years, since the days of the Broad Street Bullies, I think that's carried over even today. And again, sort of that geographical proximity to some other big markets out there like the Rangers, even the Bruins, Penguins, just on the other side of the state as well. Anyway, Twisters, that's my thoughts on the rankings of the hockey community, but what do you think? Who is higher than you would have expected? Who's lower than what you would have expected? Let me know in the comments down below, and feel free to suggest other topics you want me to cover in the off season. I've got lots planned, but there's always room for great ideas like yours. Also, don't forget that we're on social media, including on X. We're also on Instagram and Rumble. You can see all of our videos on there as well. Also, check the video description if you want to pick up some snazzy Twisted Wrister Hockey merch. All right, Twisters, well, thanks so much for watching here. Do leave a thumbs up before you go, and I'll see you around for the next one. I'm Nick. I'll catch you later. Ciao for now.